right. Hey, welcome to the stream. It's been a while. Did a test a few weeks ago and seems like everything's hammered out. So I'm going to do a stream and work on the Starshot trial experience. So if you're not familiar with Starshot, it is a new initiative from the Drupal community to kind of build like an out of the box CMS instead of building a CMS with Drupal. And I have inherently become the track lead for the trial experience, which is using WebAssembly to create a instance inside of your browser. And today I'm going to work on updating it so it doesn't install Drupal automatically, or rather it's not a pre-installed version of Drupal. So right now what happens is the environment, all right, here, let's walk through the deployment process. So we have a build which creates the archive, and actually this has been modified. So let's go to GitHub where I can show the full steps. Zoom in the page. So the current workflow does this build where it runs Drupal install and Drupal archive. That creates an archive that gets extracted into the WebAssembly environment. So let's pop over to Makefile. So the Drupal install goes and it installs Drupal and uninstalls BigPipe. And we have to uninstall BigPipe because PHP fibers aren't supported in the PHP WebAssembly yet. Because it would need some extra work. So it has this pre-built install, which means that there's a few problems that need to be solved if we install it on demand. And I've started a pull request that already does this, or attempts to, so we can look at this difference. And this is what I've been working on right now. So it gets rid of this Drupal install step and just does a build, and it adds a few patches. So it removes BigPipe from the Umami demo and standard install, and then also works on some fixes for the SQLite driver. It uses the file system service, which isn't available yet, apparently, in that install setup. So yeah, so it's got a few patches that remove BigPipe from the standard install, tries to fix some patches with SQLite, and then goes through also a few items here. So big part is getting rid of BigPipe because it uses fibers. I believe I have to actually update this local patch because I was doing a little bit of work on my personal computer and work computer. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this patch from that merge request. And I'm going to paste it into here. Yep. So let's go ahead and commit that. Update SQLite driver patch. Let's do the commit. And let's run it locally. So if you do want to give this a shot, there's the Makefile, and with PHP Storm they give you the whole Makefile UI right here to run it internally or run it inside your IDE, or you can run make commands on your machine. But you just have to run make build. So I'll go ahead and run the build. Double clicking should run it, but apparently it doesn't want to. Hold on, let me just make sure it's not my... Well, that's great. We'll just do it from the command line. So you can run make build. This is going to do the composer install, which will apply the patches and create that Drupal archive. So yeah, it'll build out Drupal, which I don't know if it didn't detect the patch had changed, so it didn't reapply it. So I'm actually going to cancel this, and let's just do Drupal source, web, core. I have a make clean, but it's a little too destructive. So I'm going to go ahead and manually remove that. So that way when Drupal does the install, it's going to reinstall Drupal core and patch it. So let's do make build. Now this will reinstall Drupal core. So maybe that's something that should be done too, is on make build, it cleans out the environment, the Drupal build, so that way Composer reinstalls everything. So we'll wait for this to download, and then I'm going to give it a try using the interactive installer in the web server. I found out it was throwing some issues where it kept redirecting and also throwing warnings on some other issues with WebAssembly. But I want to give it a fresh shot on the stream. So right now with WebAssembly, we don't have op cache. So I need to work on helping contribute a build that adds the op cache extension to PHP WebAssembly. And then also that is compiled with 32-bit integers instead of 64. I actually did a build that tries to add 64-bit support. I just need to copy those files over from that build into this environment. And maybe we can get to that on this stream also. But the main part is trying to get Drupal without the database. So that way when you launch, it unpacks the files and then will do an install for you and go there. Ideally, you would see the Drupal installer, but if that doesn't work, we're going to see if we can automate the install once the artifact is unpacked. So while this is indexing, if you haven't tried this out yet, before we get to it, I'll walk through some of the steps. This creates, can do the npm install. So when you do a launch, well, that's the cleanup. What it will do is it checks if the artifact, if you already have a built environment, and it redirects you. Otherwise, it starts preparing. So it downloads the artifact, or it checks if the artifact exists, cleans it up if it does. It'll download the artifact. That's what we built right here in this, this WASM, this Drupal WASM zip that actually gets downloaded. And then it gets put into the browser's IndexedDB. And then we have this script which unpacks it, a PHP script that gets executed. You can open that. What it does is it checks that config flavor.txt to know what is the file name, basically, or where it should be, where it should get extracted to, because we support multiple environments. And then it opens the zip file and puts it in place where it needs to be. And once that's done, it runs the init code, refreshes the worker, which is also running PHP in like CGI mode, removes that artifact, and redirects you to the environment. So wait for this to finish building. Here we go. Almost. There. All right, so we copied our archive. So now I can run make serve. All right, so now we've got the environment up and running. Just to make sure everything's on the up and up, I'm going to go ahead and application, and I'm going to clear the site data. So clearing site data will delete all the IndexedDB and the service worker. So now if I refresh, everything should be back to normal. Hey, thanks for joining in on the stream. All right, so now we've got the items loaded. This does not have a database anymore, so let's go ahead and click install and see what happens. So it's going to download the artifact and it starts extracting it. Takes a second to boot PHP Web, and we can see here there's 14,000 files to extract, and it does the process right here. I had an issue to display this as actual percentages, but for some reason it's writing to the DOM but not printing it. There's a draft PR open for that. But once that's done, it refreshes the CGI worker, service worker, and removes the archive. Now we're going to redirect into the actual Drupal site. And this takes a minute for the first, not a minute, a few seconds. Not much, just we're getting back on live streaming and working on the environment that will be the free trial, or the, not free trial, but the trial experience for Drupal Starshot or Drupal CMS, whatever the end name ends up being. Yeah. One reason it takes a bit too is it does have to download. So one of the unfortunate parts is the WASM, like it can't be, it says 3.6 megs here. Does that take some time to download? I'm actually not sure why it took so long to download locally. Usually this is pretty fast, but luckily, at least when it's deployed, I have this currently deployed on AWS with a CloudFront distribution in front of it, so things are gzipped and a bit faster. All right, so we're here. I can see it's trying to load install.php. So that will give us the Drupal installer once it boots. Probably doesn't help that PHP Storm is also indexing at the same time that I'm trying to do this. Okay, now here we go. So this was the end goal. Normally, if you were to go to the current environment at wasm-drupal.mglommen.dev and you were to click one of these items, it would take you to an installed Drupal environment. I'm going to go ahead and close that. So when you install Drupal, it lets you pick the language. I'm going to save and continue. And hope that this finishes installing soon, or this finishes indexing, so that way my computer gets some resources back. I should have done a reboot before the stream too, because I've been building PHP WASM over and over all day, trying to get a build that has the what is it called? There's a WASM big int flag, and that is supposed to enable 64-bit support in some way, or at least faking it. All right, so we got the language, we're at the install profile, which is like it just as some default configuration. Let's do standard. And so we got the payload with ID. We'll see if it continues. What I was having an issue with before is it kept resetting to choose language, and I'm not sure why. And unfortunately, with it running in a WebAssembly environment, I can't use Xdebug. So I actually have no idea why it's deciding to bounce back from this post to the original one. Like it's losing the query parameters. And this, we are posting, it is logging all of the network requests that come through. Unfortunately, it's a lot in here. So like here's our post. And then it lost track. So one thing I want to do before I pivot from this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run Drupal inside PHP's built-in web browser right here with that local archive I was using, or the source of the archive that's been patched. And I want to see if I can replicate this, because it's either a bug in Drupal core for some reason, or it's an issue with the WebAssembly runtime and using various query parameters. So here this started. So, okay, so set up verify requirements. This passed, which means that it could be breaking because of the verify requirements. So if I go visit this page directly with lane code, English, profile as standard, we'll wait for this to load. Come on. I used to have the source directory excluded from being indexed, but I was using it in some scripts. So here we go. So I feel like it might be tied to this, the fact that when we submit choose profile, it starts verifying requirements and it gets lost for some reason. I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know why this works with a Drush install. It works just fine. So what I'm thinking about doing is adding a step back in the install. So we would be here normally. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. So what I was thinking about doing is inside index.html. This just has all the JavaScript in here. After we extract the code and refresh PHP, we can say, I was thinking we do launch.inner HTML equals, we can start installing the site via a script. So I'm going to start with that. Which means that we need to create another script that we execute and run. So let's try that out. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and stop the server. We can start working on this here. So we'll do the site install, which means that we'll need to get the code. So let's just start copying in some of this boilerplate here. So const install site code equals fetch. And here I actually have this starting to download the init code before it boots PHP web, but we can just do the awaits right here. So we can do await, fetch, assets, not asserts. Let's do assets, install site.php. Then we'll do .text. And then do const. We already have it as a const. So ideally we would be checking this. Let's rename it to be init PHP code exit code. Let's just get verbose with it, and I'm going to do const install site exit code. We can name, let's change this to, I don't like having code in there twice. We'll just init PHP and install equals await php.run install site code. And then we can log it as well, because ideally we'd be tracking the exit code and saying, hey, there's an issue installing. So we go ahead and do this. Got a typo. So let's go create this file that we'll use. And copy some of this boilerplate from the init file. Mostly this error handling. Now we'll go ahead and try to start executing or installing Drupal using the code base that's available. So if I were to open the dev tools and go to application and index.db, I can zoom in on the dev tools a bit and look at the file data. We can see that everything's installed in here. We actually have vendor. Searching this usually doesn't work that well because there's so many files. Oh, okay, it wanted to. So we have the autoload right here available. The problem is if we have this flavor that's used. So what we're going to do is stop deleting it here. Let's copy this text. Actually, we're going to copy this whole thing. Copy. And so you can see inside the config file data. Refresh. Oh, it's deleted, but it's in this mount. It's in this mount that we're accessing. But now we need to, this send message sends a command to the CGI worker, and I can show you that in a second. But now we will go ahead and tell that worker to unset it. So if we look at PHP CGI base and handle message event, so it can handle all the message events. These are the various actions. So if we look at unlink, this enqueues one of the file system operations of unlink, which calls unlink inside the file system that shipped with the WASM. So the WebAssembly has a file system API that wraps around IndexedDB, or if it was Node, another storage system there. So now we'll have actually, yeah, so we'll have that flavor.text, which tells us where our doc root is. So let's copy that text as well. Ideally, we should probably just be writing the doc root into the file to avoid this extraness, but that can be a refactor for later. All right, so we need to install Drupal. So we know that's our doc root. So we're going to do class loader equals require doc root vendor autoload.php. And that's the start. So at doc root, which would be persist flavor vendor autoload. Let's go look at some existing code inside Drupal. We have a very basic install command that's not super intuitive because it's like PHP core scripts, DB tools, or Drupal. It's not like a first class CLI like most frameworks provide, but it does have code for doing an install. Actually, let's look at the script. So it takes the class loader as a constructor here, and I think we could try to execute this. The problem is it's not when PHP WASM executes, the SAPI comes not back as CLI but embed. So let's go to that scripts file I was mentioning and Drupal. So here we can see it does require the autoload and passes that to the command. So execute, this requires SQLite, changes the directory to the Drupal root. So why don't we actually, we'll do this side by side. So let's do this changes to not the doc root, but to change directory to doc root. That's going to be the web directory. If Drupal is installed, how does this check? It boots and it sees if the boot fails or not. Okay. Turn that empty. Sure. All right. So we change the directory. Get to install profile name. I guess that's going to be, we'll just say install profile equals standard. Yeah, so we're going to start with standard. do. Yep. The else we don't do. So then we get this install, which passes class loader. So it creates all these different parameters that have to be included. So let's just go ahead and copy this, which, how does it know the site path from here earlier? This gets site path, site's default, install profile, lane code, we'll say EN. And go back to where this is called. How did they get the language? They don't even. Oh, it's after profile. How did they grab it? Oh, option lane code, which I think defaults to EN, so that's fine. And let's move site path to a variable like they have. Will never be different, but for sake of changing it. Now this is important to change because that's not the location. And I believe with Drush, it reads the settings.php if it exists. So let's go to sites, settings.php, because we want to keep that pre-populated. We just don't want to ship with the database. So files.sqlite. All right. That matches. Maybe we want to keep it dynamic later, but for now, good enough. Crap, I close that file, install command. Let's bring it back into the side. Which site name, let me go back to my diff here. Site name we had as Drupal Wasm. Maybe we could do something different in the future, but we'll set it there. And this set the password to some random bytes. No, we don't want that. We want it to be admin, so that way it's a generic password they can easily use. So that's the parameters. Yeah, copies the settings of that file, which we don't need to do. Require once, this core install, which will work because we changed the directory to web. So I believe then it's just the install Drupal call. All right, because yeah, that's got the callable at the end. All right, so install Drupal class loader. And then our settings is the parameters. I'm going to take a quick second break as an ad starts and get some water. All right, let's finish calling this function. So, wait, this has install state. Where do they define that? Oh, that's just that's an argument. Sorry. So parameters. Let's do function install state. And everything that's in here. So let's, oh, actually, no. We're going to copy a little bit of this. So if not started, let's copy part of it. So if not started, started equals true. Let's do print installing. Let's see. Get install profile distribution name. Let's just look at what it is actually called. Standard. So let's say performing standard install. ... Apparently I'm just going to litter everything with ellipses. So tasks equal get the count, the progress bar start. So we'll skip this. You know, I'm just going to copy this. And no. So we could use this to, let's do this. Print JSON encode. Well, because as it's a printer, we could actually decode it. So we could say message. You could say, what do I have? Installing standard. I don't even remember what I just wrote. But we can say, we'll say steps equal count. Install tasks to perform. Install state. Something like that. We'll just start with this and we'll see where this goes. We don't need to harden for errors here. So they have if started, then it does task to perform, task current. So we can say if let's look at install task to perform. Let's look at this function actually does. For each task, completed, unset task. Okay, so it returns the count. Let's copy. Let's say task name equals task name equals task display name. Say performing task name. Count the task to be returned. So advance, wait, no. Start task. Where does it actually perform the task? Or this gets called while it's being executed, maybe. All right, so we get the task name, but let's look at, so task perform, install tasks, display name, or it's the key name, run, So you know what? We'll just copy like that and we'll put it in here. Doesn't need to be perfect. So let's look back at this function. And now this is basically the same as the install command. So callable to allow command line processing to update a progress bar. So it installs the run task, the callback. So if callback, and then it does checks when it's empty. Well, not finished. Okay, so I think we can execute this. So we have our script. It's going to load the core installer. And index.php is set to run that. I'm going to turn off the redirect just to make it a little bit so we don't have to keep going back. And let's do make serve. Let's go. I'm going to reset, which will delete the current file system. And I'm going to clear out these items. So now, let's just do the network. When I click install, so it's downloading the zip, it's unpacking it. It's booting PHP web, right? We should see PHP web. It's going to process the files. And it's installing the site. So if I look, it got the script. No. Okay. But it didn't print anything, and it should have. So installing site. Why did it not? So it went to redirecting and didn't print anything. Generic no stack. All right, removing archive. Oh, here we go. So no such file or directory. PHP wasn't run script. No such file directory. Error and include path. Persist vendor. All right. Generic no stack. Let's go look at file system. So where did this go wrong? So removing archive. This errored when trying to delete the file. That's what error number 44 means. So let's see. Where did this go wrong? Sunside playground. Assets. init.php. That's not deleting the file. That shouldn't be causing issues either. But 243, where's 243? Oh, that's coming from this log. So that's not too helpful because we don't know which script. Or I guess we do here. Yeah, so failed opening persist. It didn't have the flavor, which is coming from config. Flavor.text. Let's go back to the network and init.php. It had a stale shoot. That's why. No. Damn it. 1 second. I hit Command Q on Brave. So I think that's why I had disabled cache checked, because it kept loading cached things. All right, gives everything a second to load back. All right, let's open DevTools. I'm going to keep this disabled cache. And let's refresh this page. We'll try running this again. Because it had the init PHP code, or the init code was still unlinking the file we needed to know where the doc root was. So we'll wait for this to finish running. All right, let's do install. So downloading the artifact, init.php code. Let's look here. Okay, great. That's not cached. Extracting the archive. Once this is done, we will be refreshing the CGI worker and then executing the install site code. Which we may need to run the refresh of the worker. So that way the refresh of the worker basically synchronizes the file system, if you will. All right, so this is going. I downloaded the code. But this is the hard part about debugging anything to WebAssembly, is I don't know why this is taking so long to run. I have install site. So I'm going to actually put a console. Oh man. I can't type. Say executing install site code. So here, this is going now to the CGI worker already. And I'm not sure why that's loading the worker unless we hit this, like a send message. So yeah, but the script should be printing code. Just how this script printed these percentages, because we're calling print right here. That's exactly what should be happening in our code when we print, is it should be outputting. Oh, there we go. Wait. So, all right. So we did get it. Verify requirements. Fatal. Simple XML extension requires you to be installed. Yeah. No. Okay. Resolve all issues. All right. So this can be solved easily enough. The CGI worker doesn't let you run arbitrary code. So what we have to do here is we have these shared libraries that are added on demand. Here we have zip. But now we're going to have to copy some code from our CGI worker. So it complained about simple XML. So we need to copy these two items and tweak the syntax. So we should have, these are all available right here to be loaded. So simple XML and PDO. So let's copy SQLite and the PDO SQLite. And again, we'll fix the PHP version. Reformat that code. All right, so now if we refresh, we'll clear out the console logs and reset. Now we should be able to run the installer. without it erroring. Well, at least a new error will come up. I'll be curious to see if it complains or if it fails due to opcache and 32-bit integers again. So let's click install. Now I added this so I can know when it's actually executing. So booting PHP web is going to take a little bit longer now because it has to download these SO files. So that way it can load the all the extensions. So that's one detriment. And I kind of want to load them at page load, but also doing so is going to cause, if we did it at page load instead of when you click it, it's going to force these files to be downloaded ahead of time, and that's not great for performance, and this interface won't be permanent either. So executing install site code. Let's see what we could do too is do a print. I'm going to add that right now. I'm going to say print preparing to install. To see if that can get kicked off before whatever logic inside install Drupal is being kicked off. All right. So again, and here the exit code is always 2. I realized. So it's 2 here also when this was successful. It's not helpful when it exits out unsuccessfully. So verify requirements, exception. PHP extensions disabled. Not a lot of info in here. So we're going to see if I can copy this code, and we're going to see where error lays. System install. Required extensions. Okay, missing extensions. If not empty, and it's not going to show the full one. So guessing I got to copy this entire tidbit from the worker. I should have known that. So let's go back up to the top. The good news is if they're loading, they're going to be reloaded for the worker and be cached. So we got zlib. Icon v, gd, dom, mb string, SQLite PDO. Okay, now that's all the same. So we can go reset and try this again. All right, so wait for this to finish loading. Let's click install. So one of the next steps, because Drupal.org will eventually host this, is to have like a specific landing page where it starts automatically installing. And that's what I want to get to. Right now, instead of this pre-installed, it's one that you click a button and it has a good progress that explains what's happening. So right now, this install, instead it would say like start, and it would take you to it would go to a specific page that has like a full screen loading bar of all this happening if it's a fresh instance. But if you have an existing one, it could say resume session or reset. That would be the idea, but step 1 is having it automatically install or having a fresh database that's not pre-populated. That would be a great step forward. And that's the goal, is to leave this stream with it working. But preparing to install. Oh. Drupal kernel, because it's doing ini set. Performing site install. Okay. So that's going to be a problem if it printed output. So let's try shoot. So this error is happening because the kernel come on. Sorry, my computer is extra laggy. Not init set. This ini set. Because it checks if the SAPI is not CLI. And since it is embed, it throws that error. So there's no way to change this because it's coming back as embed. Triple kernel. Let's go back to, is there a better stack trace in here? No. I know where this is going. So inside install Drupal, we got to this point where performing site install. So one, I realized this is probably why it's breaking. Mute until restart. So I think one issue with the UI installer is that the session's getting lost, maybe, possibly. And that's why the redirect breaks. But let's get to the install tasks. And it crashed after. Oh, wait, hold on a second. It's still going. Oh. I don't know what this error came from. Installing standard. So let's ditch this message. Because it's installing, performing configure site. Let's take a look at what tasks there are. Performing configure site. That's the last one. So it could be almost ready to go. Hopefully, maybe. And what we should try to do and it redirected. Okay, so it's supposed to. Let's actually go to this site. While that's loading, we can't see anything. I'm going to go ahead and update this init.php to do a JSON encode. I'll just say message. What's this? Then we want to do we want to round it to 2 points. Sure, let's do that. All right, that's all right. It worked. So it did a fresh install without a pre-populated database. So let's go ahead and log in. We do admin like we specified. Load. And we're logged in. That's great. So now we will, let's go back here. I'm going to reset the environment. Boop. So now that this is doing JSON encode, let's update our PHP web. So we do console.log. We're actually going to do a JSON.parse. Of the detail. And then I'm going to take another quick break for the ad that's coming up, and then see if we can get this to be parsed with JSON to put some info on the page as to what's happening with the progress. So be right back. All right. Now that we have the JSON parse in place, let's try running and verify we get some of the JSON data back. So it's going to boot PHP web, which takes a bit. I feel like maybe we could put some there. That is not what I was hoping it would be when running JSON parse. I was hoping it would be actually. So maybe, oh, hold on. All right. So it's, maybe we got to do .trim. Well, we'll have to see, because now that's in process. So that's going to be the one bummer is now this takes even longer to debug small things like this. Let's like exit early. But what we can do is actually not here, but let's look at PHP web itself while this install is happening. So yeah, that's not what we want. PHP base. So this does on output on air, define property. This encodes the buffer. So this is the buffer output, which then will flush. So standard out. So it pushes each byte. And then what are we subscribing to on output? There's binary. Create the preloaded files. This input, it pushes the items. Start transactions in queue. Runs the code. There's execute the code, refresh, analyze path, read file stat, yada yada yada. So where? So PHP add event listener output. Where does it defaults? So output event type. Okay, so there's the event type. So the output buffer. This defined property buffers value standard out here. So let's read up on this really quick. MDN output buffer. Just Never mind. So in this, I don't think it's worth even showing the steps. So let's remove the steps from it. So that way it's just a message. I mean, what could be done though is we could take the install task to perform and find out the ones that have a display name and do like an array filter to get the total count. That way we could actually decrement or like show a percentage properly. But I might just make that as a note. You use array filter to count tasks with display name for progress tracking. Or there could be a separate message that's pushed like bump tracker or something of that sort. It's like at the top we could do get the total tasks and kind of like a progress bar. But you can figure it out from there. And that percentage wasn't working right. So let's do new percent. Let's just do oh, and I did it times. That's what never mind. Let's go back. I did divide by again. It should be times. We'll multiply it by 2. And not multiply by 2. Multiply by 100. So we know it installed, so let's skip this. This part we're going to do return here and kind of break this code just so we can debug the archive tidbits first. I'm going to go for about 10 more minutes and then hang it up. But this is some really good progress all on its own. So do the download. Oh no. Unflush, index, uncaught. All right. So that's not good. What's going on here? So let's do trim is not a function. Come on. So let's run this again. Let's see. If not, I can just leave it at so total files. Oh, that's why. Okay. So again, but how is trim? Because it is an array. All right. So it's an array of data. So we want to do map message message.trim. Let's try that. Restart. Let's refresh. Let's run install again. We're going to see if this works. I think that's the problem. I didn't realize it was an array. Okay, so now we got the array. Let's wrap this in. JSON parse. Pop. It's done. Let's just refresh it because we know it's still going. Try and get this to. All right, so let's do install. And this should be the trick. So there's an uncaught there. That's fine. But now. Okay. So let's look at this init. Print. We're just going to ditch that. That was some debugging. To do convert to JSON output. Same here. Now what I want to try to do is have this change the so we're going to cut that out. We're going to turn this into a full. So we're still going to do console.log event.detail. What I want to try to do is then do flavor launch.inner HTML equals message. All right, so we're going to refresh this. I'm going to run it, and we're going to see if this is going to get yeah, my computer's slowing down. Let's see if I can get this to go. All right, so we click reset. Let it reload. Let's click install. Unpacking the files. So my goal is that this will start updating. Nope. It's not. So, oh, now it just says object. Yeah, so it just ends up updating at the end, not in between for some reason. So that didn't work. Okay. Well, what we can do is still just do what we'll do for this debugging. It's not pop. We're going to do the following. And that'll be good enough of a breakpoint for today that I can pick it back up tomorrow. So do console.log. Just trim. Remove that. Let's refresh. Just give it one more shot. Then I'll sign off. Reset. So I feel like before unpacking, it should say like booting PHP, but that's fine. So we have the message. And that will run. We can have init PHP say unpacking files. Right, that's what that says. Yeah, we'll just have it log, print that percentage that way. Then eventually try to get a progress bar showing. I know when we did it or tried, it's just wouldn't update the page and couldn't figure out why. I think it might have to do with the fact that with how there's this event listener and it's on the output buffer and everything's I feel like everything is just delayed awkwardly enough that that's why it's happening. And we can't get a progress bar. Hopefully I can solve that out or get some assistance with that. All right, so this is good. I'm going to sign off. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and hope you get a chance to try this out.